Have you ever felt trapped in a job, so trapped that even when you're drowning you can't scream? That was me. I was stuck under a boss who didn't just push boundaries, he shattered them. He stole my time, my health, and almost my sanity. And for the longest time I thought I couldn't fight back. Imagine this. It's 11:47 p.m. The office should be dark, empty, silent. But instead, there I was, hunched over my desk, finishing a report my boss demanded before morning. My eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, my back ached from sitting 12 hours straight, and the only sound was the buzzing of the vending machine and the occasional creak of the air vent. Outside, the city lights of Seattle glittered like they belonged to another world. A world where people were already home, laughing, eating, living. But me? I was chained to that desk. Not by choice, by fear. And then the door opened. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Sharp, heavy, deliberate. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest. It was him. Mr. Callahan. My boss. The man who thrived on control. Still here. HM. Took you long enough. If you want to move up in this company, Martinez, you'll need to work harder than this. My body was screaming for rest, but my voice? It was silent. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Rent, bills, my mom's medication. He knew I needed this. That's why he pushed me. That's how toxic bosses operate. They feed on your desperation. And for months I let it happen. Until one night, something inside me broke. He thought I was powerless. He thought I'd just keep working, unpaid, unseen, unheard. But what he didn't know, I was taking notes. I was building a case. And when the moment came, I didn't just walk away. I sued him. And I won. Big. This is my story. A story of survival, revenge, and justice. How a toxic boss forced me into endless unpaid overtime. And how I turned the tables in a lawsuit that shocked everyone in 2025. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story. It's a warning. And maybe, just maybe, it's your story too. My name is Olivia Martinez. I'm 29, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle with creaky floors, a leaky faucet in the kitchen, and a window that overlooks more brick wall than skyline. Not glamorous, but it was mine. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of the neighbor's dog barking at the mailman, pour myself cheap coffee that always tasted a little burnt, and hop on the crowded bus to downtown. I wasn't living the dream, but I was surviving. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm. Nothing flashy, but steady enough. I liked the rhythm, emails, deadlines, client meetings. And most of all, I liked my coworkers. Rachel, with her sarcastic one-liners that kept me laughing through stressful days. Mike, who always brought extra granola bars because he knew I skipped lunch too often. They weren't just coworkers. They were my lifeline. But then there was him. Mr. Callahan. My boss. Late 40s, graying at the temples, always in suits sharper than his personality. He had this way of staring at you like you were already guilty of something. He didn't see employees, he saw tools. Replaceable. Disposable. First, I thought maybe I was overreacting. He was strict, sure. Demanding. But isn't that just corporate life? Isn't everyone tired, stressed, and stretched too thin? That's what I told myself. Until it started bleeding into everything. See, I wasn't just working for myself. My mom, Rosa, had health problems. Diabetes, high blood pressure, the kind of things insurance loves to make complicated. I sent her money every month. I couldn't afford to lose my paycheck, no matter how toxic the job became. And that's what made me vulnerable. Callahan must have sensed it, the way predators sense weakness. He piled on the work, pushed the deadlines tighter, and always expected me to stay late. No pay. No thanks. Just pressure. I still remember the night that broke me. Mom had a doctor's appointment at 6 p.m. I'd promised her I'd be there. But at 5:30, Callahan stormed into my cubicle with a client file and barked, "I need this done tonight." No excuses. I tried to protest. I said, "My mom, she has an appointment." But he cut me off. "Then reschedule it. The company comes first." So I stayed. And while Mom sat in that waiting room alone, I was in the office finishing his report. When I finally got home past midnight, my voicemail was full. Mom's voice was shaky, disappointed, but she didn't yell. She just said, "Mija, I wish you'd been there." That was the first time I realized This job wasn't just costing me sleep. It was stealing my life. From that point on, I started seeing things differently. Every time Callahan smirked at my exhaustion, every time he dumped another file on my desk at 7 p.m., every time he mocked me in front of the team for complaining too much, it wasn't just work anymore. It was abuse. And something deep inside me, something I didn't even know I had, started whispering, "Fight back." I wasn't ready to fight him yet. Not then. I still thought, maybe if I just worked harder, maybe if I proved myself, things would get better. But they didn't. They got worse. Much worse. And that's where the real story begins. It started slowly. At first, I thought maybe this was just the price of climbing the corporate ladder. A late-night email here. A Saturday quick check-in call there. But then it snowballed. What was once the exception became the rule. Soon I was working 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, but my paycheck stayed the same. 40 hours on paper. Nothing more. And whenever I dared to ask about it, Callahan's response was always the same. Overtime? That's what commitment looks like, Olivia. If you want to make it here, you'll do what it takes. He said it like he was motivating me. But really? He was exploiting me. I missed birthdays. Friends stopped inviting me out because they knew I'd cancel. My mom, she stopped asking if I'd come visit on weekends. She didn't want to hear my excuses anymore. I'd sit in that gray cubicle under buzzing fluorescent lights, watching the cleaning crew vacuum around me at 11 p.m., thinking, what am I even doing with my life? And still, I stayed. Because fear is powerful. Fear of losing rent money. Fear of being labeled difficult. Fear of starting over. One Monday morning, after pulling a 14-hour shift on Sunday, I stumbled into the office with coffee in one hand and barely brushed hair. I was 5 minutes late. Just 5. Callahan spotted me immediately. In front of the whole team, he barked. "Nice of you to finally join us, Martinez. Maybe next time you can grace us with your presence before noon." The room went silent. Everyone stared at their desks. My cheeks burned, but I said nothing. I just sat down, pretending his words didn't stab me like knives. I cried where no one could see me. But the tears weren't just sadness anymore. They were anger. One night, around midnight, as I sat staring at another pointless spreadsheet, I opened my phone and searched. Unpaid overtime, illegal, Washington State. And there it was. In black and white. Everything Callahan was forcing us to do. It wasn't just unfair. It was illegal. My hands shook as I scrolled through the labor laws, case studies, lawsuits. People had fought back. And they had won. That night I did something different. I didn't just finish the spreadsheet. I started a journal. Every extra hour. Every late-night email. Every text from Callahan demanding I cancel my plans. I wrote it all down. Day by day, line by line, I was building something. A weapon. He didn't know it yet, but every time he stole from me, I was quietly turning it into evidence. Rachel noticed first. One evening she whispered, "You're writing something?" I showed her my notes. She looked around nervously and said, "Be careful. He'll crush you if he finds out." But then she added, "Keep going. You're right. He's breaking the law." Mike wasn't as brave. He just shook his head and muttered, "I've got 2 kids. I can't risk it." That's when I realized most of us knew it was wrong. But fear kept us silent. Fear kept us chained. And me? I was terrified too. But something about writing it all down made me feel less powerless. One Friday night, 9:15 p.m., I packed my bag quietly, determined to leave. For once I wanted dinner at home, maybe even a movie. Callahan spotted me at the door. "Leaving already?" he sneered. "I didn't realize we were paying you to work part-time, Martinez." I froze. My coworkers looked away. And in that moment, humiliated, furious, I heard myself whisper, "I'll finish it tomorrow." And I walked out. But as I rode the bus home, staring at my reflection in the dark window, one thought repeated over and over. He's not just cruel. He's breaking the law. And one day he's going to pay for this. I didn't know exactly how yet. I didn't know how much strength it would take. But deep down I knew this. I wasn't going to let him keep stealing my life. And when the breaking point came, everything exploded. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Funny how life-changing moments never wait for the perfect dramatic setup. They just hit you in the middle of another miserable workday. That morning, Callahan barged into my cubicle with bloodshot eyes and a coffee stain down his shirt. He slapped a thick file onto my keyboard and barked, "I need this proposal rewritten by 7 p.m. tonight. And don't bother going home until it's flawless." I stared at the file. My stomach dropped. I had already pulled 12 hours the day before. My body was screaming for rest. So I finally said it. "Mr. Callahan, I've already logged 70 hours this week. And it's only Tuesday." He sneered. "Then you're finally starting to show commitment. Congratulations." And right there in front of him I closed my laptop. My hands were shaking but my voice was steady. "I'm done." The whole office froze. You could have heard a pin drop. Callahan's face turned red. Then purple. "Excuse me." I stood up. "I've kept records. Every unpaid hour. Every demand. Every threat. And I'm done being silent." And for the first time, I watched fear flicker across his face. That night, I walked into a lawyer's office downtown. Her name was Sarah Chun, sharp, fierce, and utterly brilliant. I poured out my story, showed her my notes, emails, time logs. When I finished, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and said the words that would change everything. "Olivia, you have an airtight case. He's not just toxic. He's breaking federal law." I felt chills run down my spine. For the first time in months, I wasn't powerless. I had a weapon. Court was terrifying. Callahan had lawyers, slick, expensive, confident. They tried to paint me as ungrateful, lazy, someone who just couldn't handle the job. But then Sarah stood. Calm. Precise. She laid out my evidence piece by piece. The journal with every overtime hour logged. Screenshots of late-night texts. Email chains with timestamps past midnight. Witness statements from Rachel and even a former employee who had quit because of the same abuse. One by one, the puzzle pieces fit together. The story was undeniable. Callahan hadn't just been tough. He had been exploitative. Illegal. When I took the stand, my hands trembled. But as I looked at the jury, I thought of all those nights in the office, the tears in the bathroom, my mom waiting alone at her appointments. And I spoke. I told them everything. How it felt to be treated like less than human. How I'd lost time, health, family moments, because of one man's greed and ego. By the time I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward listening. After days of testimony, the jury filed back in. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. The foreman stood. "Read the verdict. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Olivia Martinez." The room erupted. My knees went weak. Tears blurred my vision. Sarah squeezed my hand, whispering, "You did it." The judge's gavel came down hard. Callahan and the company were ordered to pay me 6 figures in unpaid wages and damages. 6 figures. But honestly, the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching Callahan's face as the verdict was read. He wasn't in control anymore. He wasn't the predator. He was exposed, defeated, finished. That day, I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp Seattle air. Cameras flashed. Strangers clapped. But all I felt was lighter. Like I had finally dropped the heaviest weight I'd ever carried. He thought he owned me. He thought fear would keep me silent forever. But fear doesn't last. And when courage finally shows up, it destroys men like him. You ever have that moment where life feels like it's setting you up for something bigger? That was me. Standing at the courthouse steps with my lawyer, clutching a folder of evidence that felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried at work. My toxic boss thought I was powerless. But today he was about to learn otherwise. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Maybe it was the AC, maybe it was the nerves. Either way, I took a deep breath and sat down next to my attorney, Lisa Tran, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had built her career fighting workplace injustice. Across the aisle sat Richard, my former boss, flanked by his corporate lawyers. He looked smug at first, like this whole thing was a waste of time. His posture screamed arrogance. He believed money, status, and a few carefully worded excuses would bury my story. But he didn't know what was coming. Lisa stood first, laying out our case. She spoke clearly, methodically, almost like she was weaving a story. But not just any story, my story. She presented email chains where Richard demanded we push through weekends, without mention of overtime. She showed Slack messages where I directly asked about compensation, only to be ignored or ridiculed. She even had timestamp security badge logs, proving how late employees like me were forced to stay at the office. But the real bombshell? A recording. One night, after yet another unpaid 12-hour shift, I stayed late cleaning up my desk. Richard had barged into the office, ranting to another manager about how these kids should be grateful to even have jobs, and how he'd rather fire them all than pay a single dime in overtime. I had my phone on record. That audio echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Richard's face drained of color. His lawyers shuffled papers nervously, whispering frantically. The judge leaned forward, eyebrow raised. "Mr. Holloway, is this your voice?" Richard stuttered. His arrogance began to crumble. For the first time, the mask slipped. As the recording ended, Lisa turned to the jury. "This isn't just about unpaid hours. This is about exploitation. About a man who built his success on the backs of people he thought were too scared, too replaceable to fight back." But today, Sarah proved him wrong. I felt the jury's eyes on me. Some nodded. A few even looked angry on my behalf. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. Richard tried to fight back. His lawyers argued I was exaggerating, that I had volunteered for the extra hours. When it was my turn to take the stand, I told them everything. I painted the picture, the exhaustion, the missed birthdays, the mental toll. I talked about my coworkers, too scared to speak up, terrified of losing their jobs. And then, with my voice steady but my heart racing, I said, no one should have to choose between keeping their paycheck and keeping their dignity. Richard didn't just steal our time. He stole our lives. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked moved. After hours that felt like days, the jury returned. I sat gripping the edge of my chair, Lisa's hand steady on mine. On the count of wage theft, we find in favor of the plaintiff. My breath caught. In the matter of damages, we award Sarah and her fellow employees a settlement of $1.2 million. The courtroom erupted. My coworkers, who had quietly shown up in the back, hugged each other. Lisa squeezed my hand so hard I thought my bones might crack. And Richard? His smug grin was gone, replaced with a pale, defeated expression. Justice. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just about the money. Richard's company, once thriving, quickly spiraled. News outlets picked up the story. Toxic boss loses big in landmark overtime lawsuit. His reputation was shredded. Clients dropped contracts. Shareholders demanded answers. And the best part? That audio recording, the one he never thought would see the light of day, became the centerpiece of labor rights discussions across the country. It wasn't just about my win anymore. It was about changing the game for thousands of workers who'd been quietly suffering. Richard didn't just lose in court. He lost his empire. And me? I finally walked away free. For years, Richard thought he could push us around, that he was untouchable. But the truth is, no one is above accountability. And sometimes the people you least expect to fight back are the ones who bring you down the hardest. When the gavel came down, I thought I'd feel nothing but relief. And I did at first. But what came after was something deeper. Something I didn't expect. The news spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours, headlines were everywhere. Toxic boss ordered to pay over $1 million in landmark overtime case. Employee stands up, wins big against corporate exploitation. Audio recording exposes CEO's shocking abuse of staff. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years were texting me. Old coworkers called me, crying, thanking me for standing up when they couldn't. Even strangers online, people I'd never met, sent messages saying, "You gave me courage. You made me believe it's possible." For once, I wasn't just another overworked employee. I was proof that one person could take down a system built to silence them. With the settlement, I didn't go buy a fancy car or some huge house. No, I did something Richard would never understand. I rested. For the first time in years, I took mornings slow. I had coffee on my porch. I called my mom, not from a rush train ride, but from my living room with all the time in the world. Then I thought bigger. I used part of the money to help some of my coworkers who were still struggling. We started a small fund for wage abuse victims, a resource where others could get legal help without being crushed by fear or financial strain. And me? I decided to launch a consulting business focused on healthy workplaces. A place where employees weren't treated like machines. Funny, right? The thing Richard thought would break me actually became the thing that built me. Meanwhile, Richard's empire crumbled. His company lost contracts. His board forced him out. He became the poster child for everything wrong with corporate greed. Last I heard, he tried to start a new firm under a different name. But the internet doesn't forget. Every time his name popped up, so did the headlines. Toxic boss. Wage thief. Lawsuit loser. And honestly, that was the sweetest revenge of all. But let me be clear. This story, my story, isn't just about a big settlement or a toxic boss getting what he deserved. It's about something deeper. It's about knowing your worth. About refusing to let anyone, no matter how much power they hold, convince you that your time, your energy, your life is disposable. Because here's the truth. Every unpaid hour was a stolen memory. Every forced weekend was a stolen opportunity. Every insult, every dismissal, every you should be grateful was a theft of dignity. And when I finally stood up, I wasn't just fighting for me. I was fighting for everyone who ever sat at their desk at 2 a.m., unpaid, unseen, and unheard. Sometimes I think back to those long nights. The empty office. The flickering lights. My hands shaking on a keyboard as exhaustion blurred my vision. And then I think about now. The freedom. The peace. The ability to breathe without fear. And I realize I would go through it all again. Because it led me here. To this moment. To this truth. No one, not even the most toxic boss in the world, can own your spirit unless you let them. When I walked out of that courtroom for the last time, the sky looked different. Brighter. Lighter. Like the weight I'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. I wasn't just free from Richard. I was free from the belief that I didn't matter. For years I thought silence was survival. That keeping my head down, working harder, swallowing the insults was the only way forward. But silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the people hurting you. The moment I chose to speak, to fight, to demand better, everything changed. And here's the truth I want you to take away from my story. Backhand index pointing right, you are never as powerless as they make you feel. Maybe you're watching this and thinking, that's me. That's my boss. That's my life. If that's you, I want you to hear this. You are not alone. There are people, laws, and communities ready to stand with you. And sometimes, one brave step is enough to start a chain reaction you never thought possible. If this story resonated with you, don't just click away. Let's make this a conversation. Speech balloon, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a toxic boss? What's the worst workplace injustice you faced? And what would you do if you had the chance to stand up like I did? Your voice matters. Your story matters. And trust me, someone out there needs to hear it. Richard thought he owned us. That we were nothing but replaceable pieces in his machine. But in the end, he was wrong. Because when you push people too far, when you steal their time, their dignity, their lives, eventually they'll rise. And when they do, justice won't just knock. It'll kick the door down. Beat, pause for dramatic effect. So remember this. A toxic boss may win battles. But the people always win the war. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next real-life story of revenge and justice. And hey, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because you never know whose life you might change.